Hello and welcome to Swipe. Coming up, it's been a bad week for Apple as they posted disappointing last quarter results for 2012. But it's smiles all round at Google as they break the 50 billion barrier. Games makers behind the scenes at the company behind Total War. And we review the best download titles for PlayStation and Xbox. Well, it's official. The iPhone 5 has not been the success that Apple told us it was going to be. The tech giant missed Wall Street expectations for the final 3 months of 2012 as sales of its flagship phone came in below target, sending its shares plunging. Apple did post huge profits of £8.7 billion, but it wasn't enough to keep those investors happy. Record earnings, record profits, massive increases in sales of iPhones and iPads alike. But the tech giant's share price tanked as investors took the sheen off Apple's halo. A record 47.8 million iPhones were sold in the last 3 months, up 23% from a year ago. 22.9 million iPads sold, another record, up a third year on year. The company had $54.5 billion in revenues, of which $13.1 billion was profit, another record. Yet having missed market projections and downgraded its forecast for the next 3 months, its share price plummeted to a year low in after-hours trading, wiping $27 billion off its value.
All these new devices have communication.
The death of Steve Jobs, the company's visionary co-founder, left Apple struggling for new ideas. There have been no truly revolutionary products since he passed away, simply updates of existing gadgets. And in his absence, and the absence of that new killer tech, some see a lack of direction.
If there was something he didn't like, it would often be scrapped. And that's really helped Apple's reputation for perfectionism, for a high quality of design across the board. So that's what Apple needs to make sure people think that it's still doing, that it's still got that single-minded striving for perfection.
In truth, it's been a difficult year. Apple's share price started the year close to $400, rising steadily to the release of the iPad 3. A significant decline through April and May was followed by a rally, helped perhaps by the Mountain Lion operating system and its mobile equivalent. But since then, despite the launch of the much-vaunted iPhone 5 and iPad mini, the share price has plummeted and continues to fall. Apple is operating in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Samsung's Galaxy 4S could conceivably have as many fanboys as the next iteration of the iPhone. And being a purveyor of premium consumer technology, Apple's margins are considerably smaller than, say, Google's or Amazon's. The future is, if not bleak, then more than a little uncertain.
I suspect that there's a shift from early adopters to what I kind of feel is a bit of a smart Luddite, people who are skipping generations of phones and devices because they want to wait, because they don't want to update all of their peripheral hardware at the same time. They're waiting for the next kind of killer iPhone because they're coming out so often.
In an industry where so many are downsizing or going to the wall, Apple continues to demand respect even without record revenues and profits. But the longer the wait for another truly revolutionary Apple product, the greater the chance that one of their rivals will get there first. You're watching Swipe. Coming up, we get you up to date with the latest technology news. But first, many of you will have spent a good few hours playing computer games this week, but have you given much thought about how the games are put together? Well, we decided to take a glimpse behind the curtain by visiting one of the UK's biggest game developers, Creative Assembly. Well, they're the team behind Sega's strategy games, the Total War series. Swipe travelled down to their West Sussex HQ to find out more.
For the past 25 years, Creative Assembly has been designing games in the UK. Starting out with just one man working in his bedroom, the company now employs just over 250 people, from designers to programmers. Each project is a team effort.
Making a game is a really multidisciplinary thing now. So to make a Total War game, we have artists, we have designers, we have economists, because we're doing a strategy game where you're simulating, medieval economies and that kind of thing. Lots of programmers, motion capture. There's so many different disciplines involved now. It's one of the most interesting areas to work in.
The process of creating a game from scratch can be time-consuming and expensive. And for historical strategy games like the Total War series, you really have to know your subject.
We have to do a lot of research, understand the period. We've got to generate lists of things like units that we want to have in the game, different kinds of soldiers, for instance. We have a sort of design phase early on. We do some prototyping of particular things that we're wanting to try, and then we have a sort of big production phase, which is the main point that we're making the game. And then once we've kind of made all the core elements and they're all in place, we actually then have to spend a long time really tuning it, getting the gameplay working exactly how we want to actually make the finished product.
One of the biggest challenges the team faces is making the action sequences look and sound realistic.
Time to die!
Actors provide the characters' voices and their movement is created using a method called motion capture.
The actors get dressed up in these suits with particular markers on them so that the cameras can track the different parts of their bodies and how they're moving, and we record their fighting movements, and then when we have that data we actually process it and attach it to the 3D models so that the 3D models animate in exactly the same way that those actors fought. That gives us this really authentic look for our battles.
The technology used in games is always evolving, so in order to keep up with the competition, developers have to try and predict the future.
It's always a bit like clay pigeon shooting, where you're aiming slightly ahead of what the tech can actually do. And hopefully you don't aim too far ahead, because if you do, your game won't work very well, or too far behind, because if you're too far behind, then competitors will do something better. So it's always, you're always trying to guess what's going to happen and aim ahead.
The UK games industry has been punching above its weight for years, and in terms of creativity, it's certainly hard to beat.
We stand, we die, or we triumph!
You're watching Swipe. Coming up, we take a look at some of the top games to download onto your consoles. But first, here's a roundup of anything you might have missed over the last few days. There were smiles all round at Google this week. The search giant recorded revenues of $50 billion last year. It was over expectations and shows that advertisers are still prepared to pay for clicks, even though more and more people are using their mobiles to go online. Co-founder Larry Page welcomed the figures, saying they were not a bad achievement. TweetDeck will cease to exist as a company unless it files its latest accounts. The company, which is British, was bought by Twitter in 2011, but in a letter first highlighted by Sky News, TweetDeck has warned that it will be dissolved unless it files accounts within the next 3 months. It could be game over for Atari. The American arm of the company that brought us Pong has filed for bankruptcy. It wants to separate itself from its French parent company, which hasn't made a profit since 1999. Atari dominated the early console era, selling around 30 million of its classic wood-panelled Atari 2600, which, by the way, now sell for hundreds on eBay. And such is the nostalgia for all things Atari, there are even rumours that a movie version of Asteroids might be in development. Well, it seems Twitter is not just about celebrity updates and bad jokes. A team at the University of South Carolina have found that it actually seems to help people fighting the flab. In a study of people trying to lose weight, those who tweeted most lost most. The researchers concluded that posting updates about their progress helped motivate people and provided support, albeit virtual. Last week we discussed the next generation of consoles, but this week we're taking a look at games that you can download. We asked Lucy James from Jinx TV to take us through her top 4 titles for PlayStation and Xbox users.
People have come to me in search of what they desire most. Few find what they are looking for. Even fewer ever leave.
So The Cave is the latest game from Ron Gilbert, who created Monkey Island, Manic Mansion. You have 7 characters and you pick 3 of them. And you can play this game alone or in co-op with 2 other people. And so each character, there's a monk and a hillbilly and a knight, and they all have their own story, their own personality. But what really draws them all together is the cave. So you go in the cave and each character has its own abilities. And each ability, you have to work together to unlock puzzles, complete them. It's a platformer. But there's also, some parts of the cave will be locked off to you, so it kind of promotes multiple playthroughs. But the cave itself kind of, as it draws you in, it kind of wants to unlock the dark secret that everyone has inside themselves. And so I find that incredibly interesting. Project Zomboid, it's your typical zombie survival horror thing, but with a twist in that it's not just the zombies you're battling against, it's yourself. So, things that you aren't really touched upon in zombie games, depression, substance abuse, illness, dehydration, all of this. If you go to the Project Zomboid website, you can download a build of the game. It's not the final build, but as soon as it keeps going, they will add it on feed for free. But that won't be the final game because they're releasing it Minecraft style, so they're going to keep updating it and adding new features and things, and eventually going to put multiplayer in, co-op, constant online servers, all these really big plans.
I'm going to find Minsk and make him pay.
StarCraft 2's expansion pack, Heart of the Swarm, is coming out in March. Now, we don't really have much of an esports scene in the UK, but if you go to somewhere like South Korea, esports are huge.
Stand down!
It's a real-time strategy game, so what you have to do is, you have units and you send them out to gather minerals. You use these minerals to build other structures, and then you go out and do a bit of recon around the maps, and then you find the other team, destroy their structures, and that's basically how you play StarCraft. We'll get shot for saying that because it's a lot more complicated than that. But StarCraft 2 has an expansion pack called Heart of the Swarm, and it follows on, in the single player at least, the story of Sarah Kerrigan, and who is the self-titled Queen of Blades, and you kind of see her as the anti-hero, and she's the protagonist of Heart of the Swarm as she tries to regain control. So in the multiplayer, they are adding 7 new units, and they are taking away 3. So as you can imagine, for the pundits and the commentators, that's going to be really interesting to see them kind of get to grips with, because a lot of them are pro StarCraft players themselves. So Terraria is another PC indie title that's kind of made it big, and now it's coming to home consoles. And essentially, you're going to find a lot of parallels with another pretty popular indie game, Minecraft. There is mining and crafting in Terraria, but there's also a lot of exploration, and it's not just a Minecraft clone. It's there's a lot of exploration, there's a lot of combat, which is something Minecraft, while it has a little bit of, not really to the extent of Terraria. There are, a lot of different enemies, lots of bosses, all this kind of thing. And there's also RPG elements, you can level up your character and things. And it's a really interesting experience. I'm really keen to see how they've managed to port it to using a controller. Minecraft did it pretty well. It's quite, simplistic, especially what they did with the crafting. But with Terraria, the crafting's a lot simpler. You don't have to match up designs and things, you just click on something and you make it.
Well, that's it for this week. Remember, you can catch up with all the breaking tech stories all week on Sky News for iPad, our smartphone apps, and skynews.com. We'll see you next time.